Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome to Q&A number 54.
54.
I went to go look up news, and it was mostly depressing, so I'm not from 1954. I just looked up news to try and find some cool things about 54, and it was all depressing, so I'm not going to share any of it. So that's all to say, I have no idea what's cool about 54. And I'm just going to keep saying that about numbers that we don't know it about until someone writes us with something cool about one of the numbers that we don't know anything cool about.
We're one step closer to 55, a milestone.
That's true.
Number.
55 is pretty exciting.
It is.
Anyway, welcome. We've got some good ones today, though I think... all right, I don't know why I'd say jinx it, but I will say I think this is going to be a slightly shorter one. But we have proven us both wrong on that guess on a number of occasions. So
I don't know if it's going to be any shorter. I think it will be average length. We will see how we do.
You want to kick us off then?
Yes. Okay. The first one says, I've recently got out of a relationship with a person I really love. I've always struggled with a deep, agonizing desire to love and to be loved. I get extremely lonely and insecure. What do you do to help ease your loneliness when you don't have a romantic partner? What helps with the overwhelming sadness? I'm having a really hard time.
This makes my heart ache a little bit for that listener. And yeah, I think we have a lot of good ideas betwixt the two of us. One of the first things I thought of that's not a DBT skill, though I guess you could probably shove it in under mindfulness if you tried real hard and made some elbow room. But remember other people who love you, right? I absolutely understand that there is a difference between the love of a sibling and the love of a romantic partner, and that's specifically what you're talking about craving, right? Wanting, needing in your life here. And it still can help with insecurities and just a sense of connectedness and a sense of, trying to combat loneliness, to realize you do have other connections, right? There are other people who give a shit about your existence. And it can be helpful, especially when we've recently lost one person, to zoom out a little bit, as I think Michelle would probably say. You like to talk about zooming out and zooming in. So zoom out a little bit and be like, okay, I have lost this, and this is a real hard loss, right? Not to minimize at all the loss of a relationship. And dialectics, right? There's more to your world, right, than that human being. And to try and remember that and get that little bit of a bigger picture sometimes. Because it wouldn't be an episode if I didn't suggest someone do this for some reason. Self-soothe with the 5 senses. Though really, right, for that kind of sadness, right, loneliness, insecurity, I really think about all of the things that I find really soothing with the 5 senses. And those are the kinds of things I would want to turn to if I were in those head spaces. Hot baths, warm beverages, snuggling in under a heated blanket. Is there a theme for me with warmth, you think? But, right, taking care of yourself in that sort of like a child way, right? That's just soft and gentle and kind. Another thought I had, which I guess you could also shove under mindfulness, sort of somewhere between mindfulness and check the facts if they had a weird baby, is think about people that you love. And ask yourself if they derive their value from the attention of others, or if they're valuable no matter who sees it, right? Based solely on who they are, right? If a beloved friend of yours, lost their partner, would they suddenly stop having value, right? Because they don't have that, they don't have a romantic partnership in their life. My bet is, like most humans, you see yourself differently than you do everybody else. And sometimes it can be helpful to realize that how we view the world is very different, from how we're viewing ourselves. And so if you would give other people grace, or if you can easily see that other people have value and worth and merit outside the context of a romantic situation, you might be able to bring that to bear on your own situation, of realizing, I am also a people, right? I am a human just like these other people that I think this way about. So why would I be any different? Right? And see if you can move your brain a little bit more into this sort of self-compassionate, mindful self-compassion kind of place of recognizing that you are a human having a human experience. You're not alone in it. And trying to be kind to yourself as you go through it. So those are my thoughts.
Good thoughts. The thing that came up for me around this is a little bit twofold. So one, the stuff that I'm going to talk about is stuff specifically for grief around losing either like a specific romantic partner through divorce or breakup or that kind of a thing. Also, I think, can apply to maybe what this listener is describing about when you're just missing a romantic partner in general, just wishing you had someone and the grief that comes with that. So what I'm going to talk about does apply to what this listener is specifically speaking to, but also this can really more broadly apply to when we feel any emotion really strongly. I mean, this listener is describing really feeling loneliness, sadness. So of course I'm going to address that, but whenever we feel an emotion, we really have two options. One is to lean into that emotion. The other option is to distract from it. And DBT has a number of skills that fall into both categories because there's benefits to both. There's benefits to leaning in and there's benefits to distracting from. And it's just knowing when you need to do each. So to give this listener some ideas in each of those regards for this situation of feeling lonely and sad about not having a romantic partner, ways that I thought of to lean into that feeling, to not run from it, to really let yourself feel it, and to do that in what will hopefully feel safe and not overwhelming. This could look like journaling, writing letters you don't send, especially if you're missing a particular romantic partner from your past. You could listen to songs that make you think of a particular romantic partner, or even just songs that maybe evoke that feeling of sadness for you and really help it come to the forefront. You can look at pictures of a past romantic partner or things of that nature. So again, you want to know to what extent and how much and when to do this. You want to create a container and really carve out some time to let yourself cry, to let yourself feel this sadness. And then also know that that time will come to an end and that you're not going to stay in that place perpetually. If you stay in that place perpetually, or if again you lean into the point where you start to feel emotional overwhelm, then the purpose backfires a little bit. The purpose is to help you be with your emotion and keep it company, but not have it be that you cease to function because of how much you're feeling it. So those are some options for how to lean in. As far as the other side of the coin with distracting from these emotions, with this situation, I really think that one way to do that could be just trying to socialize with other people. I mean, Kate brought this up right at the beginning. Remember who else loves you. So think of those family members or those friends or those coworkers or whoever it is and try to socialize and spend time with those people to get your mind off of the fact that you don't have a romantic partner at this time who loves you. So that's one specific way, but honestly, anything from accepts is perfect for when you are, I mean, that's what accepts was designed for, was distraction. When you find yourself really stuck in these emotions, right? I've just been feeling sadness for days and I'm ready to change the emotional channel, so to speak. That's when you want to go to accepts. Really, anything is great from accepts to help you shift out of the sadness and the loneliness so that you can experience an emotion that may uplift you a little bit, give you a bit of a reprieve from those emotions. Ultimately, I think it's great to have a mix of both, right? Both leaning in and distracting from, depending on what your life looks like. You know, we do need to say distract from when we're needing to be at work, for example. But we can lean into when we have some time to ourselves and that kind of a thing. So I would recommend picking picking something for distraction and something for leaning into, and give both a try to see how they feel for you, listener.
Yeah. That's nice. This one, I realized that I will just preface this with saying you're going to get most of the answer for this.
Because I'm the one who's responding first, yes.
You're the one who responded first. There's just not that much to say on this one. But you give good advice. So, the next one reads, what is the best advice for finding a DBT skills group and a DBT individual therapist? Do you think that in-person for both of these is best? Do people recommend doing both group and individual at the same time? Thank you in advance.
I really appreciated just these practical questions because, especially if you're brand new to DBT, these may be questions that are stumping you and you're wanting to take a step forward into learning more about DBT, but you're not really sure how to best go about it. So I really liked these questions from this listener. So I'm just going to go in order. So the first one, what is the best advice for finding a DBT skills group and a DBT individual therapist? It's about to sound super simple, but start with a Google search was what first came to me for your area or for your state as a whole. If you're not really coming up with much, or maybe you're coming up with too much, you're like, holy cow, how am I supposed to narrow this down? Kay and I are totally open to people posting in our Facebook group for the podcast and just asking, saying, hey, this is the state or the area that I live in. Does anybody know of a DBT therapist or a DBT group that's happening in the area? Because we have listeners from all over who are part of our Facebook group. So we've had other listeners already make posts like that in the Facebook group, so you can certainly make one too. And again, we have like DBT providers in our Facebook group. So you may have somebody comment directly and say, hey, that's me. I'm a DBT therapist near you, right? And, here's my email address and my website and we can connect. So I would recommend that. As for, do you think that in person for both of these is best? I don't necessarily think in person is best. I think there are benefits from doing groups and individual therapy in person, and there's benefits to doing those things virtually. It's just going to depend on your preference level. And the other thing that it depends on a lot of things, right? It depends maybe on some practical factors of maybe there is a DBT group happening in your state, but it's like 2 hours away. And, well, I guess if you wanted to attend in person, that would be out. But the nice thing about virtual groups is that, right, it just opens up a whole new world for you as far as geography goes. As long as it's, in your state, you're good to go, even if it is hours away. And I think something to consider when you're making that decision about in-person or virtual, maybe thinking about the privacy that you have at home or how distracted you may be in your home setting. And I apologize if you guys can hear that. Somebody just started a lawnmower literally right outside my window. But I'm just going to keep talking awesome. Anyways. I hope it's not too distracting.
It's the sounds of summer perennially captured in the...
Yes, exactly. There's only so much we can control when we're recording. But if you really sense that if you are participating in groups at home that you're just going to be really distracted, I would consider really trying to find an in-person group if you can. The caveat too that I will say, at least in my experience, because I've had a couple clients wanting DBT groups, like personal clients of mine, and they really want in-person, and I'm looking. So many groups are virtual. It's just harder to find an in-person group these days, has been my experience with trying to help clients in that area. So it will really depend on, I guess, kind of the first answer I gave of what options are there near you. If you have plenty, awesome, but you may have very few and the only options might be virtual, and I would go with that. It's better than nothing. So that's my take on that question. And then, do people recommend doing both group and individual at the same time? That is recommended. And there's a couple different ways to look at it. So one is that there's what is called gold standard DBT programs. If you join a gold standard program, then what this means is that you will be doing a skills group every week. You will be meeting with an individual DBT therapist every week, and you will also have access to phone coaching with your therapist. So in other words, if you are experiencing a crisis, you can reach out to your therapist and receive some phone coaching as part of a gold standard program. So that is the ideal, right? It's called gold standard for a reason. However, we also recognize that 1, it can be very hard to find gold standard DBT programs. 2, even if you do find them, it's a big time commitment and it can be a big financial commitment. So we understand if that's not realistic for you to participate in a gold standard program. What we do recommend, Kate and I, is that if you are going to do a DBT group, at the very least, have an individual therapist of your own. This doesn't need to be a therapist who is specifically trained in DBT. Just make sure you have a therapist. And for some groups, like I know for our groups, that is part of the criteria for joining. We will not take somebody as a group participant if they are not also seeing a therapist of their own. So a lot of times what you'll find out there is people who are offering DBT groups, but they're not also offering the gold standard of an individual DBT therapist along with it. So is it considered best? Yes. Is it necessary? We don't believe so. And that is kind of hotly contested and debated within the DBT community. You will find DBT practitioners who are like, you have to be a part of a gold standard program. And you'll find others who maybe view it as a little more of a gray area. But what Kate and I would stand firm on is that you should have an individual therapist when you are participating in the skills group. That's important.
For best result, have individual support.
Yes. Yeah. Just in case things come up in group and you can't necessarily get that outside support as intensely from your group facilitators like you would in a gold standard program.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So like I said, I don't have a huge amount to add to that. I will say that, well, my first 2 suggestions would certainly be found through Googling. I did think some people get overwhelmed by just like Google searches and all of the results, etc. So if you want a little bit of a narrow view, you could go check out Psychology Today or Therapy Den. There are other online directories, but those are the 2 biggest ones that I think about. Right, both for individual therapists, and often folks will have their groups listed on there as well. And if you end up finding an individual therapist first, right, if that's the order you tackle things in, which I think Michelle and I would agree that that's the right order and or simultaneous. But if you end up finding the individual therapist first, you can also ask them for recommendations or referrals to groups, especially if they're a DBT specific therapist. They're probably going to have some idea of groups that are run in the area. And so that might be one of the fastest ways to find an available group local to you, is by getting a DBT therapist first and asking them for their input on the subject.
Yeah. I guess one thing, I don't want to put you too much on the spot, Kate, but I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on the second question of, do you think that in person for both of these is best? Because in the sense of, right, like, you know, you've now done more virtual DBT groups than I have, because I'm a little bit on a hiatus from leading groups with you. And I'm just wondering, as you've gotten more and more experience under your belt with the virtual realm, like if this listener did decide to join a virtual group and they have hesitations about it, like what are your recommendations for how to have that be a really positive experience if they can't find an in-person group?
Yeah, because there are many things I like or even liked better about in-person groups, but the accessibility just can't be beaten, right? Like the ability to, I mean, gosh, right? Join even if you're sick. Join even if you're on, you know, things that make you can't drive, medications or something, right? Being able to participate from your car outside of work, right? Like there's just so much that it opens up for ability to access, which I think is wonderful. One thing I would say to make it a really positive experience is the best thing that people get out of groups, other than the skills themselves, is hearing other people's questions and comments. So you can help encourage fellow group members to share their thoughts and questions by doing so yourself, right? Lead the charge. So participating really helps the group feel cohesive, really helps broaden the diversity of what you get out of the experience. And you get to know that you're doing that for someone else, right? By bringing your own perspective and questions to the group. So I would say participation is a big thing to make it a positive experience for everybody involved. And I don't know, possibly even more important in virtual than in person, and more important in either of those than in a gold standard program, because you're going to get a lot of support in being consistent in the gold standard program, is to do the homework. I know Michelle and I have said it, I don't know, ad nauseum at this point, but you get out of DBT what you put into it. So especially with virtual groups where you're doing less like chit-chatting with other participants, right? There might be this little bit of a sense of a barrier there. If you really want the stuff to click, and if you want to have good questions for the next week, things like that, really work on tuning into and trying to practice or think about at least the skills between sessions. I think that's maybe most important on an online non-gold standard program than of all the other options of programs, right? It's just like put your commitment into it. And that's going to have a lot to do with what you get out of it. Because definitely the social aspect is the thing that is missed the most. So the more you participate, and the more everyone participates, and vulnerability tends to invite vulnerability. So right, the more people share, that really helps to make up for what is lost somewhat over virtual groups. So
okay, yeah, nice.
So
Thanks
yeah,
for adding all that on. Oh, I didn't even notice.
For asking.
Funny.
And next one's yours.
Mm-hmm. Okay, third one. So this one is short. It says, is there a good skill to use for someone struggling with DPDR? So DPDR stands for de-personalization and derealization. I don't feel like a real person anymore. I'm not sure what skill can help with this, if there even is one.
So I think you'll find that Michelle and I have managed to have simultaneously exactly the same answer while still having different answers, which is exciting. But the basic idea that I come to just immediately is mindfulness. Now, again, like I said, Michelle will have other great mindfulness suggestions. But the ones that I was thinking of in particular, we're thinking of like being mindful of things like your wants, your likes, your dislikes, right? Those are things that real people have, right? This is a thing that's alive in your body. This is a thing that's being produced organically in your brain, right? Are these wants and diswants? Ooh, hello, Kate's brain. I'm here today. Dislikes. Goodness. Right? Like that, like, ew, I don't like that. Right? That's a person, right? That's a person reaction. That's something that grounds you to reality and to the reality of yourself, I think, a little bit. And then my other thought here was to try and find a mantra and repeat the fuck out of it. Right, something. So I made one up here. This is just me pulling something out of my ass. What I had here is, I am real, I am grounded, I am here. But something, right, relatively short, something you can memorize easily, something you can just put on repeat on your head until you are sick of it, and then do it for about twice that long. But right, something that feels to you like it helps combat the DPDR for you, right? Like whatever your worst symptoms are, or whatever the thoughts that most disturb you, trying to find a mantra that best serves as a contradiction to those sorts of thoughts or headspaces, and then repeat, right? The whole neurons that fire together, wire together thing is your friend here. The more you think that thought, the easier that thought becomes to think. And I mean that on a purely physical level. Right? And so it's annoying, and it will feel false, right? To start with, almost certainly. It will feel like, why am I lying to myself a little bit? But the golden thing about the whole neurons that fire together, wire together thing is that your belief is not necessary for it to work the way it works. Because again, this is just a matter of the structure of your brain, not a belief system that you have. So, right, find something that contradicts the worst of that for you, and repeat. And remember to be grounded in your experience of yourself, with Michelle will go more into here in a second, because I think those are my thoughts.
Great. I realized too, neither of us wrote this down in our notes because we know what depersonalization and derealization are because
this
we're
is
therapists.
true.
But I realized as you were diving into talking, I was like, hold on a second. Maybe we should explain what those terms mean for listeners who may have no
Real.
idea what we're talking about when we say
That
those
is
things.
fair.
So I guess before I go into my response, I'll share how I think of those concepts or how I explain them to clients. And then, Kate, if you feel like I missed any important pieces, you can chime in with your understanding of it. But depersonalization is basically the experience where you are, sometimes it shows up as really feeling outside your body, disconnected from yourself. It can also look like questioning if you are real or the things that you are experiencing are real and actually happening to you. And then derealization is when you start to question your surroundings, we could say. Other people, where you are, what's happening, all of that maybe has a quality of feeling not real and questioning if those things are even happening, how you're perceiving them to happen. That's how I typically explain it to people. I don't know if you have anything to add on there for what we're addressing.
Not necessarily too much. I know that I've heard, I think, like, depersonalization is also sometimes being described as, like, not quite out of body, but like you're something, like your body is a puppet, right? Like, that's getting, that you're kind of driving.
Control of it.
Not, exactly, right? Like, or maybe even if you're controlling it, it's not because you're in it. Right? It's not you're in your body and moving it because it's you. It's like you're outside of your body and controlling like a marionette kind of thing. Like, it's just this layer of distance between you and your experience, right? Of your self, of your body, of your beingness.
Yeah, it's a good way to describe it.
But no, I think that's just like an analogy that I would add on, but I think you put it well.
Yeah. Okay, great. So that's what we're talking about here is, you know, if somebody's experiencing things like this, and not always, but it often can be that these things stem from experiencing trauma. These things can certainly be associated with PTSD. So, you know, we don't know what it's stemming from for this listener, but as Kate really emphasized with mindfulness, that was my initial thought too. For what skill can help with this would be mindfulness. Because the thing about mindfulness is that it's all about noticing and paying attention. So might this feel a little bit like an uphill battle if you're struggling with depersonalization and derealization? Yeah, this is going to be tougher for you and also more necessary, I would say. It becomes even more important to make sure that you are engaging mindfully with what you're experiencing and what you're doing and really observing, describing, and participating with your environment and with your internal world. I thought it would be important to start with noticing what's tangible in your environment. To me, anyways, I don't know, again, know your thoughts on this, Kate, or again, how it is for this listener in particular. I feel like sometimes starting with mindfulness for things outside of yourself is easier than starting with mindfulness of your own internal experience. On principle, I think I believe that. And I think that, I think that would also apply when we're talking about, I'm just going to shorten it to DPDR like they did, so I don't keep saying it over and over again. That's a tricky acronym to pronounce. But I think it's easier to start with what is outside of you. Notice an object that's nearby. Touch it, interact with it, observe it, describe it. Really, really focus all of your attention on tangible things in your environment that your brain can get to the point where it believes, okay, this object is really here. I am really touching this. This is tangible. This is real. So starting with that may be a good place to begin. And then once you've gotten some practice with that, and once that's maybe feeling a little easier, then you can make the shift into what Kate was talking about really nicely, which is, Kate was talking about noticing like your likes and your dislikes and your wants and those types of things. And I was kind of thinking along similar lines of noticing just, okay, what are my thoughts? What are my emotions? What physical sensations do I feel within my body? And again, this may be really tough. I hope that you have a therapist that you're working with already to help you with these things. If you don't, maybe a really good time to get into therapy, because it is going to be a tough go to do this on your own. And it may be helpful to be able to bring up with the therapist if you're practicing some of these things as you're going through your day and you're finding it really challenging, to then talk about it with the therapist. So then, I don't know, you could even practice in session together so your therapist can get a taste of, oh, okay, this is what's going on for you, kind of a thing. But yeah, mindfulness is going to be tough, but it's what's needed, I think, when you're struggling with DPDR. There.
Nice.
Got it.
You got it. Last one.
Okay, last one. Yeah.
All right. This one reads, I am confused about check the facts. I have health anxiety, and checking facts after or before an appointment is not a healthy choice for me. What I mean is that information overload can overwhelm me and trigger worst-case scenarios. I have a health issue that could go in a couple of different directions with different treatments. We just do not have all the information yet, and it depends on how my body reacts. I'm being vague on purpose, since details make me more anxious, and fact-checking all the possible treatments is a nightmare for my anxiety. My doctor tells me what I need to know, and until I know more, I want to live my life and not look up a bunch of medical information that will heighten my anxiety and lessen my quality of life. Is this avoidance? I really cannot dive into all the facts, so not sure DBT would work for my anxiety.
You know what I'm thinking of freshly in this moment is reflecting back to one of the things that I said in response to the first listener, which is that it's knowing about when to lean into emotions, and it's about knowing when to distract from emotions, which someone could label as avoidance if we're distracting from what we're feeling emotionally and trying to, as I put it earlier, like change that emotional channel. So I don't know. That's the part that really stood out to me reading this. Was that final question of, is this avoidance? And I was like, sometimes I think we need to avoid things that are just going to lead to emotional overwhelm. And so I honestly thought reading this, when the listener said too, my doctor tells me what I need to know. And until I know more, I want to live my life and not look up a bunch of medical information. I was like, perfect. I think you hit the nail on the head. And that sounds super healthy to me, to block out the rest of the noise. I would be concerned if this listener was saying that they were refusing to even listen to their doctor. Right? And I could imagine that going one of two ways. Like maybe your doctor's telling you everything is fine and you're like, but no, it's not. I'm going to keep going on WebMD and looking things up. That would maybe be concerning. Or if your doctor's like, well, I am pretty concerned about this thing, and you're deciding to stick your head in the sand and not engage in treatments that your doctor might be recommending or things like that. Both of those scenarios would lead me to maybe have concerns in this case, but no. I mean, I think it's a very wise mind decision to focus on what is factual for you and your specific circumstances. Sure, there are other people in the world diagnosed with the same health issue, but that doesn't mean that your experiences are going to be the same as theirs. Your experiences are unique to you. And so focusing on what is factual for you rather than what is factual for your health condition as a whole makes a lot of sense to me. So I think you're actually doing a pretty amazing job here, listener. That was my overall response when I read this. I was like, I think you're doing really well. Even just in terms of looking back on when they say I'm being vague on purpose, since details make me more anxious, where they didn't disclose what their health issue is or anything further into it. I was like, that's amazing awareness and a great way to... The lawnmower just started back up again. I really hope you all can't hear it. But a great way to just be compassionate towards yourself and to know your limits and to know your boundaries and to know what's going to send you into that place of emotional overwhelm. I was really proud of you for being vague. I was like, yes, that's good. So you're doing a great job. Better than you may think you are with this.
That makes sense to me. And yeah, I think I like how you're pointing out, the actions are already taking. Like, it seems like the steps that they're taking to try and take care of themselves are really in alignment, right, with like a lot of DBT stuff. That said, I did want to lean into them saying they were confused about lean in, because you were talking about leaning into stuff. I did want to focus in on they're a little bit talking about being confused about check the facts, right? So like, the first sentence is them saying they're confused about check the facts, and the last sentence of the paragraph is that they really cannot dive into all the facts, so they're not sure if it would work for them. And that's left me thinking that maybe there is a slight misconception about just how checking the facts might look in this particular listener's situation. Right? Because it's not so much like going out and like fact checking, or not, well, how do I put that? Checking for facts, right? Like, it's not necessarily like, let me research, right? All of these different treatments, all these different side effects, all of these different, symptoms, things like that. What I imagine it might look like, and bear in mind, this is a super duper condensed version of what doing a full check the facts might look like for this person, but just to give a high level overview. I imagine that it look something like saying, I'm feeling wildly anxious about my health. I do have this condition, and here are the possible consequences of my condition. Here's how I will cope if the worst things do happen. And since I really am at risk of negative consequences, my anxiety does fit the facts, although its intensity may not. Right? That's it. This isn't about going in and learning more about your medical condition. What it is really checking about whether or not your anxiety is a commensurate response to the situation. And you don't need a lot of facts about your health I know essentially no facts about your health because you set such a lovely boundary to take care of yourself. So thumbs up, like Michelle said, for being vague. And even with your vagueness, I'm pretty sure I feel close to certain that you having anxiety about what you're going through is an emotion that makes sense, right? That fits the facts of what's going on for you. Again, I wouldn't want to say whether or not its intensity fits the facts, right? Since that's the other half of the question, right? With check the facts is the emotion and or its intensity or duration. But the emotion itself, I'm pretty close to sure that that's right? And so that's more what you're looking for from check the facts is, given what I know, again, you don't have to go out to learn more, but given what you know, does anxiety fit the facts of the situation? So I think you could absolutely use this skill still to mitigate your anxiety, in part by validating it. One thing that I think surprises a lot of people with using check the facts that I've heard from students in our groups, Michelle, is this idea that sometimes validating the emotion, right, when they come up with, yeah, my emotion does fit the facts, that still helps regulate the emotion in question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Because validation often helps soothe an emotion, right? Oftentimes our emotions just jack themselves up ever higher the more we fight them, right? The more we try and put ourselves down or argue with the feeling, right? Like that can make a feeling just grow and grow and grow. On the other hand, if you're like, hey, feeling, I see you, you're doing it right. Right? There's often a relaxation, right? That comes like, oh, this is an appropriate emotion. And sometimes that can be soothing in and of itself. That said, since you may at some point in the future need to do more of that, looking at the actual facts around your health issue, which again, seems pretty reasonable to bring up an amount of anxiety, you may need to transition to using some opposite action. Because at that point, even if your emotion and its intensity fits the facts, acting on it may not be effective, which is the other way you get into opposite action, right? Is by figuring out, well, sure, my emotion fits the facts, but acting on it is not going to get me to a good place. So just another little skill promo, I guess, for opposite action, because I suspect that some of that is going to be probably uncomfortably necessary for the listener at some point.
Mm-hmm. So I will wrap us up, which is to say that if you have questions for us, you can email them at dbtmepodcast@gmail.com or post in the Facebook group like where we get most of our Q&A material from these days, where lots of people post these things. So you can also post questions there, and we will make sure to get to them at some point in a future Q&A.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye. To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week, join our Facebook group. Simply log in to your Facebook profile and search for DBT Me Podcast.